"Grandma, tonight my parents are going to take away your fortune," whispered my granddaughter. She said it so quietly I almost thought I imagined it. "Grandma, tonight my parents are going to take your money." 8 years old. Dressed like a little angel in her birthday dress. Eyes big and sincere, like she didn't even know how dangerous her words were. But I knew. In that moment, every ribbon, every balloon, every polite smile in the room blurred behind a storm that started inside my chest. And I knew I was no longer the guest. I was the target. Before I take you into what happened next, please hit that subscribe button for Revenge with Becky. If you've ever been blindsided by your own family, betrayed after years of loyalty and love, you're not alone. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. My name is Julia Barrett, and if I'm being honest, I saw the signs long before Alexa whispered those words. I just didn't want to believe them. I'm 54. A widow. Quiet. Comfortable with a simple life. I manage what my father left me after he passed. A collection of properties, accounts, and trusts he worked his whole life to build. It was supposed to be a safety net for our family. But to Harry and Mary it had become something else. A shortcut. An entitlement. And the moment Alexa opened her mouth, I realized they'd been plotting behind my back for longer than I wanted to imagine. It began early that morning, 7:03 a.m. to be exact, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Harry calling. That alone was strange. He never called this early. I picked up cautiously. "Hi, Mom. Hope I didn't wake you." I glanced at the clock and took a sip of coffee. "Harry, it's 7. What's wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong," he said quickly, voice tight. "I just wanted to be sure you're still coming to Alexa's party today." I raised an eyebrow. "Of course I'm coming. I've never missed a birthday." I know, he said too fast. "It's just, Mary wanted me to call. She's been planning everything and asked me to make sure you come early." "Early?" "Yeah. Like, noon? The party starts at 2, but we wanted to talk about some family stuff beforehand." My heart slowed. Family stuff. Nothing serious. Just planning things. Mary's been reading about wealth distribution and legacy protection. She has a few ideas she wanted to share. There was the real reason. Not the party. Not Alexa. Not celebration. Control. I showed up at 12 o'clock sharp. Mary greeted me with that tight-lipped smile she saves for people she can't openly insult. "You're early," she said, even though they asked me to be. "You wanted to talk," I replied, holding out the tray of cranberry orange muffins Alexa loves. She took them wordlessly and led me toward the dining room, where Harry waited behind a laptop and a pile of folders. "Mom," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "Thanks for coming early. You said there were some documents?" Mary sat across from me, already positioning herself like a consultant instead of a daughter-in-law. "We just want to be proactive. There's a lot of value sitting in your hands right now, and we think it would be smart to start transitioning some of that into a long-term family strategy." "In other words," I said, flipping through the top document, "you'd like me to give up control of my father's trust." Harry looked like a child caught cheating on a test. "No one's asking you to give anything up. Just consider letting us help manage it. Legally, responsibly." I leaned back in my chair. "You've never once asked to help until now." "Because we didn't want to overstep," Mary cut in. "But your father's estate is substantial and it's only going to get more complicated. You're under a lot of pressure." I gave her a smile as thin as tissue. "I appreciate the concern. Let's revisit it after the party." Harry looked disappointed. Mary? Annoyed. They'd expected me to fold. They didn't realize I already saw through them. The party began. Alexa's friends squealed and ran circles around the living room. Mary played the hostess, too sweet and too stiff. I watched them from a quiet corner, wondering how many guests had any idea what kind of performance was going on behind the scenes. When it was time for presents, I knelt beside Alexa to help untie the ribbon on her locket box. And that's when she leaned in, eyes wide and honest. "Grandma, tonight my parents are going to take your money." I froze. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I heard Mommy talking to Daddy. They said if you didn't agree, they'd make you feel too tired to run everything. That you don't even know what to do with it anyway." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled, gave her a kiss on the cheek and whispered, "Thank you for telling me." And in that moment my plan began. They wanted to take everything? Fine. Let them try. I would give them a show. Then I would teach them that the quiet woman in the corner is often the one with the sharpest mind. There's a kind of quiet rage that doesn't boil over. It sharpens. As I stood in the middle of Alexa's birthday party, smiling for pictures and thanking guests for coming, my mind was no longer in the room. It was racing through spreadsheets, documents, and the fine print of my father's legacy. I wasn't just a grandmother that day. I was a strategist. And I was already 5 moves ahead. Because while Harry and Mary thought they had me cornered, they had no idea who they were trying to outmaneuver. They assumed I'd go along like I always had. The gentle mom who nodded during awkward conversations, who handed over casseroles and polite smiles, and never pushed back when I was treated like furniture at their dinner table. But something happens when your own grandchild gives you a warning you were never meant to hear. It changes you. It clarifies everything. I stayed at the party longer than I had planned. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to watch them. I needed to listen, to observe every glance, every whisper between Mary and Harry, every time they checked their phones or looked over at me like I was a number they were waiting to collect. I noticed how Mary clinked her glass twice at one point, gathering attention like she was hosting a press conference. I just want to say thank you all for coming, she beamed. Alexa's so lucky to be surrounded by family, especially her grandmother Julia, who's always been there for her. My name on her tongue felt like oil on silk. Then she added, we're excited about the future. So many plans. So many changes coming. We're just grateful to have such support. Changes. That word stuck. After cake, I hugged Alexa again and whispered something only she could hear. You're a brave girl. And Grandma's going to fix this. She nodded like a soldier who had delivered the warning and was ready for retreat. By the time I left, I wasn't shaken. I was certain. The next morning I called Alan, my father's former attorney and longtime friend. He'd retired to Arizona last year, but we still spoke every now and then. I'd never asked him for much. He always said, if you ever need help with the trust, call me first before you trust anyone else. I took him up on that. Alan, I said after the usual pleasantries. I think Harry and Mary are about to make a move. His tone changed instantly. Tell me everything. I recounted the conversation, the documents, and Alexa's warning. He sighed. I was afraid of this. When your father named you sole trustee, he expected pushback eventually. He told me once, Julia's calm on the outside, but she's the only one I trust not to sell me off for parts. I smiled at that. Sounds like him. Do not sign a thing, Alan said firmly. I'll email you a list of provisions we added when we finalized the trust. There are clauses in there that Harry and Mary wouldn't know to look for. Good, I said. Because I'm not just saying no. I'm going to let them reveal who they really are. Then you need to play dumb for now. I already am. That week I did exactly what Alan advised. I called Harry on Wednesday. Hi, sweetheart. I've been thinking about what you and Mary said. Maybe it is time to simplify a few things. I could almost hear his posture shift. Really? Yes. But I'd feel better running everything by a professional before making decisions. Just to be safe. He didn't like that part. Well, the advisor Mary found is very good. I'm sure, I said lightly. But I'd like someone I know. No offense. He paused. You're not worried about us, are you? I gave a small laugh. Of course not. You're my son. Which was true. But that didn't make him trustworthy. On Friday, I met with Rachel, a woman Alan recommended. A no-nonsense estate consultant with a sharp mind and zero tolerance for manipulation. She reviewed all the documents Harry and Mary had given me. These aren't suggestions, she said bluntly. This is a complete structural overhaul. They're trying to shift beneficiary power and reassign ownership. To themselves. Indirectly. Through joint power of attorney and advisory control. And if I signed? You'd legally hand over almost everything. Slowly, yes. But it's written to appear harmless while centralizing control. I stared at the papers and nodded. Can you make me a version of these documents, with just enough tweaks? She raised a brow. To trick them. To test them. I planned a brunch that Sunday. Just me, Harry, and Mary. I told them I was ready to move forward, but only if we could go through the paperwork together. Harry arrived first, nervous but hopeful. Mary followed shortly after, dressed like she was headed to a business seminar, not her mother-in-law's kitchen. I had muffins ready, tea brewing, and Rachel's edited papers waiting in a plain folder on the counter. "Thank you for meeting me," I said as I slid the folder across the table. "I had these reviewed. There are just a few edits." Mary opened it and scanned the front page. I watched her eyes shift, ever so slightly. Her mouth twitched. Harry glanced at her, waiting for approval. "These look good," she said carefully. "What kind of edits?" "Oh, just added clarity," I said. "Nothing major. And I made sure the trust will transfer everything to Alexa when she turns 25, not before." Mary's smile cracked. "Oh," she said. "That's responsible. And the clause that prevents any current family member from holding financial advisory power without a co-signer was Alan's idea." Harry looked up. "Alan? Dad's attorney?" I nodded. I figured he'd know what Dad would want. Silence. Mary folded the folder slowly. "Well, I need time to read this," she said tightly. "Of course," I replied. "Take all the time you need." They left within 20 minutes. I stood at the window and watched them walk to their car. Mary was talking fast. Harry wasn't meeting her eyes. I'd seen that look before, when he was a boy and caught red-handed sneaking money from my purse to buy snacks at school. But this time the stakes were higher. This time they weren't stealing gum money. They were trying to steal my life's legacy. On Monday, I froze all pending authorizations tied to the trust. Alan helped file a protective clause with the trust's custodial firm to lock out unauthorized modifications. Rachel made sure a secondary clause was added to require my physical presence, verified by thumbprint, for any structural change. And just for insurance, I moved 50% of the liquid assets into a private long-term charitable endowment under Alexa's name. It couldn't be touched by anyone, not even me, until she turned 25. I protected her future from her own parents, just like my father had once protected mine. By the end of the week, Harry called again. "Mom, I feel like you don't trust us." I sighed. "I trust that you've made some poor choices. But you're still my son. I don't know what you think we were trying to do." "I know exactly what you were trying to do." Silence. "Your daughter told me." More silence. "You taught her to lie without even realizing it. But she's not like you." "Not yet." Then I said the words I'd never said to him before. "Harry, I love you. But I will not hand my life over to people who treat me like a burden." "I don't know what to say," he mumbled. "Then say nothing." And I ended the call. That night, Alexa sent me a voice message. "Hi, Grandma. Mommy and Daddy are upset. I just wanted to say I love you. Thank you for my necklace. I wear it every day." I cried in the quiet. Not because I was broken, but because I was finally strong enough to stop pretending I wasn't. I always believed the worst betrayals come wrapped in silence. Not violence. Not cruelty. Just quiet assumptions. The way they counted on me not to fight. Not to ask questions. Not to notice. But I noticed everything now. My silence. That was over. After I ended the call with Harry, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the carpet and listening to the sound of my own breath. It was steady, because I had stopped second-guessing myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't asking what I did wrong. I wasn't replaying a conversation wondering if I was overreacting. Well, I had proof. In their voices. In their paper trail. In the way their daughter had unknowingly exposed them with a single whisper. "Grandma, tonight my parents are going to take your money." And if that was their plan, they were about to find out what happens when the woman you underestimated decides not just to protect herself, but to win. The next week I filed my own updates. I rewrote the advisory conditions in my estate plan to explicitly bar any future control by Harry or Mary unless approved by an external third-party panel made up of 3 unrelated professionals, 2 financial experts and 1 personal advocate. Alan had that handled in 2 days. I also submitted a long-overdue application for a family foundation in my father's name, the Walter L. Barrett Educational Trust, to fund scholarships for young women in STEM. And the first beneficiary? A name already written on my heart. Alexa Barrett. Set to activate at age 18 with access only for tuition, books, housing and health care. No parental override. No exceptions. The moment the papers were finalized, I felt a weight lift. I hadn't just protected my assets. I had secured a future where the most innocent person in all this wouldn't pay for her parents' greed. It didn't take long for the ripples to hit. 2 weeks later, Mary showed up at my house unannounced. I heard her before I saw her, heels stomping down the path like judgment was marching behind her. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Her arms were crossed and her eyes scanned my face like I was a weak spot in a business plan. "We need to talk," she said. "No, Mary. You need to listen." That threw her. "I know about the trust edits," she said. "I know you went to Alan." "Of course I did. He was my father's attorney and my friend." "You thought I wouldn't." She took a breath, dropped the anger for something softer, but more calculated. "We just wanted to help. Harry and I were only trying to prepare for the future." "That's not true," I said. "You weren't preparing. You were positioning. You're overreacting." "No," I said quietly. "I'm responding." She hesitated, her voice low now. "So what? You're just cutting us out?" I shook my head. "No. I'm cutting you off. There's a difference." She narrowed her eyes. "You think you're doing the right thing, but you're just isolating your family. You did that part all on your own." Then I closed the door. No slamming. No shouting. Just a quiet click. It was the most powerful sound I'd ever made. The next few days were quiet. Harry didn't call. Mary didn't text. The silence was a storm just beyond the horizon. But I didn't fear it, because I knew what was coming next. I'd been waiting for the retaliation. And it came not from them but from a lawyer's letter. Delivered in a crisp white envelope. Clean font. Polite words. A request for clarification on my recent trust modifications. And at the bottom? Representing clients, Harold and Mary Barrett. I almost laughed. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a test. A weak attempt to rattle me. I called Alan, who referred me to a litigation attorney he trusted named Camille. Fast. Quiet. Camille handled it in 2 phone calls and 1 certified response letter. In it she listed the legal authority I held, the documentation proving I acted within my rights, and a firm notice that any future intimidation attempts would result in counteraction. When she finished reading it to me, I asked her how confident she felt. She smiled through the phone. "I've handled corporate fraud rings tougher than these 2. They're amateurs." That was good enough for me. That weekend I finally returned to something I'd been avoiding. My father's study. After his death I packed it all into boxes. Letters, papers, photos. I couldn't look at it back then. Not without unraveling. But now I was ready. I opened one box and found his journal. I flipped through the pages and landed on one entry written the year Alexa was born. "I hope she grows up with her grandmother's eyes. Sharp, patient, and the kind that always see more than they say." I didn't cry. I smiled. Because even when I didn't believe in myself, my father had. And I was finally living up to what he saw. Then like clockwork, Harry called again. His voice was tired. Hollow. "I didn't know Mary sent that letter," he said. "She acted on her own." I let the lie hang in the air. He continued. "Alexa misses you. She keeps asking when she can come visit." My heart cracked open, but not the way it used to. This time I didn't offer comfort. I offered clarity. "She's always welcome," I said. "But not with either of you manipulating her." He didn't answer. So I added, "She will have everything she needs. But what she won't have is an example of people who lie to take what isn't theirs. You're punishing us. I'm protecting her. You're destroying our family." "No, Harry. I'm finally telling the truth about it." Later that week I got a letter in Alexa's handwriting. Colorful, a little messy, but unmistakably hers. "Dear Grandma, I miss you. Mommy said you're mad, but I know it's not because of me. I hope we can do puzzles again soon. I love you. Alexa." Purple heart. Inside she had drawn a picture of the 2 of us, sitting on my porch swing with the sun above us and little birds in the trees. I put it on my fridge. And that night I sat down and wrote my own letter. "Sweetheart, Grandma loves you more than you can imagine. I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you. You told me the truth when no one else would. I will always protect you. And someday I'll explain everything in a way that makes sense. Until then, know this. You are safe. You are brave. And you are loved beyond words. Grandma." In the end, I didn't just protect a fortune. I reclaimed my voice. I unlearned my silence. And I made sure the story of what they tried to do never became my legacy. There are 2 kinds of power in a family. The kind people show off at parties, Status, money, influence, and the kind you earn quietly. The kind built on truth, resilience, and knowing when to stop playing along. I had finally chosen the second kind. And I wasn't going back. A few days after I mailed the letter to Alexa, I sat in my garden watching the wind move through the hydrangeas. It was early morning and the light made everything look honest. I sipped my tea, read the paper, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Calm. No noise. No performance. No obligation. And that's when it hit me. For years I had mistaken access for closeness. Letting Harry and Mary in and out of my life as they pleased. Always hoping that if I gave a little more, bent a little further, they'd finally see me not as a checkbook or a backup plan, but as a woman. A mother. A person. But they never saw that. And I had stopped waiting to be seen. That same morning I got an email from Rachel, my estate advisor. Subject line: New trust documentation ready for signature. And it were 2 final updates. A notarized amendment that permanently removed Harry and Mary from any present or future fiduciary roles. The completed documents to launch the Walter Barrett Foundation, set to begin its first scholarship cycle next spring. Your father would be proud, Rachel wrote. I pressed my fingers against the keyboard and whispered, I hope so. The foundation took off faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, the first press release ran in the local paper. It talked about my father's legacy, my decision to honor him through education, and our commitment to supporting women in science and technology. Harry and Mary didn't call. But I know they saw it. Because 2 days later, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a printed email thread between Mary and a man named Brent L., some financial advisor they had clearly consulted. At the bottom, Mary had written in pen, "This was never supposed to hurt anyone. I thought you'd understand eventually." No signature. No apology. No accountability. Just another attempt to shift blame without getting their hands dirty. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a copy of the thread and handed it over to Camille, my legal contact, to place in my file, just in case they ever tried to claim innocence down the road. And then, I moved on. Because I had better things to do than read the rationalizations of people who mistook my kindness for weakness. At the end of the month, I hosted a small gathering at the community center. Not a party. A celebration of courage. 10 women from town, all around my age or older, showed up, invited quietly through word of mouth. No one knew exactly why we were gathering. They just knew something real was going to happen. I called it inheritance beyond blood. We sat in a circle with coffee and old blankets and stories that would make your spine stiffen. Every woman there had been betrayed in some way, by family, by children, by spouses. And not one of them had ever been allowed to say it aloud without being called bitter. Till now. We talked. We cried. We laughed. One woman named Dorothy said, "They keep telling me to move on, but never once asked where I'm supposed to move to." Another said, "My son told me I'd be nothing without him. So I became something without him." When it was my turn, I stood with my hands folded. I raised a boy who learned how to smile through manipulation. I watched him marry a woman who made lies look like planning. And I waited, for years, for both of them to stop needing me only when it was convenient. They never did. But I did. Then I paused and said, "And I'm not angry. I'm done." The room went silent. Then someone started clapping. Not loud. Just enough. And then they all joined in. That applause healed something in me. Not because I needed praise, but because I needed witnesses. A few days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Harry. He looked tired. Older. Smaller somehow. He didn't try to smile. "I'm not here to fight," he said. I didn't answer. I miss you. So I stayed quiet. He shifted. "Alexa's asking questions. She's confused." "She's a smart girl," I said. "She doesn't understand why you're not around anymore." "And what have you told her?" "That you're busy. That it's complicated." I nodded. "You lied to her again." He looked at the ground. I didn't know what else to say. I stepped onto the porch. "Then maybe try this. We made a mistake. We thought we could manipulate someone who spent her entire life keeping this family together. And we were wrong." "I didn't mean to." "Harry. You did." He looked up then. Really looked. And I think, for the first time, he saw me not as his mother, but as a woman who wasn't afraid of him anymore. "Will I ever fix this?" he asked. That's not a question you ask me, I said. That's a question you ask yourself. Every day. For the rest of your life. He nodded. I won't bother you again. Then he turned and walked away. And I didn't stop him. That night I sat on my back porch under the string lights Charles hung the year before he died. I drank my tea and watched the stars settle into place. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was completion. The full circle. The moment where you no longer wonder if they'll change. Because you've already changed enough for both of you. It was a Thursday when the letter came. No return address again. The handwriting was unmistakable, Alexa's. Inside was a folded drawing and a note written in pencil, each word spelled carefully as though she was afraid of getting something wrong. Dear Grandma, Daddy said we can't come over right now. But I miss you. I showed my friend the locket you gave me and she said it's the prettiest thing ever. I told her I have a secret. You are my safe place. Love, Alexa. Purple Heart. My hands trembled as I read it. Not from sadness. From knowing that somewhere inside that little girl, there was still a light I had helped plant. And no matter how cold things became between her parents and me, that light would stay burning. Because Alexa remembered the truth. And even if no one else stood on my side, she had once whispered her loyalty into my ear, before anyone thought she understood the stakes. She understood more than they ever did. That letter told me one thing clearly. My job wasn't over. I couldn't change Harry or Mary. I'd stopped trying. But Alexa? She was still growing. Still learning who to trust. Still deciding what love looked like. So I started writing her a book. Not a memoir. Not a diary. A collection of letters. Each one titled simply, For When You Need to Remember Who You Are. The first page read, To my darling Alexa. These pages are not instructions. They're not rules or warnings. They're a map of how to find yourself when the world tries to tell you what to become. I hope one day when you're old enough to understand it all, you'll read these and know. You were loved loudly and clearly by a woman who chose truth over convenience. Grandma. Every few days I added a letter. Some were stories about her as a baby. Others were about me, things I'd never said aloud. Mistakes I made. Moments I stayed silent when I should have spoken. There was a letter about the day I almost sold my father's lake house but changed my mind because the porch still smelled like his cologne when it rained. There was one about the day I realized her mother never liked me, and how I kept trying anyway. And there was one called, How to Know the Difference Between Love and Leverage. I didn't write that one to be cruel. I wrote it to tell her, love never comes with strings disguised as ribbons. By the end of the month I'd filled over 60 pages. I sealed the letters in a leather-bound journal and locked it in the fireproof safe beneath my bed. It was written into my will. She'd receive it at age 18. That would be the real inheritance. Not the money. Not the foundation. Not the land. The truth. The kind you can only trust to paper when everything else fades. One day Camille called with an update. Just a heads up, she said. Harry and Mary quietly dropped any financial inquiries into your estate. The records show they've backed off. Good, I replied. She paused. Are you satisfied? It was an interesting question. I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean. Like I'd scrubbed off years of shrinking and apologizing and pretending I didn't hear what was said behind my back. Camille, I said softly, I don't need satisfaction. I just need peace. He understood. Sometimes lawyers are the only ones who do. The following weekend I was sitting at the town farmers market when I saw them. Harry, Mary, Alexa, walking hand in hand. They didn't see me at first. Mary looked tired. Harry thinner. Alexa had 2 braids and a small bag of kettle corn tucked under her arm. I turned away to give them space. But then I heard a tiny voice behind me. Grandma. I turned. Alexa stood there, unsure if she was allowed to smile. I knelt down and opened my arms. She ran into them like she'd never been told not to. Behind her, Harry hesitated, but didn't interfere. Hi, I said, pulling back gently. I missed you, she said. I missed you too. We didn't speak about the locket or the whispers or the foundation or the silence. We just stood there breathing the same air again. And then Mary called, Alexa, let's go. Alexa turned to me. Can I hug you one more time? I nodded. She squeezed me so tight I felt the last of my anger melt. And just as quickly as she came, she was gone again. But something had shifted. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just truth. Laid bare. Without explanation. A few weeks later, I was asked to speak at a local charity event for women entrepreneurs. They had heard about my foundation and wanted someone with a powerful family story. I almost declined. And when I stood in front of that microphone, I said this. Sometimes the people you raise will try to raise themselves above you. Sometimes the children you fed will call you bitter for being hungry. And sometimes, the people who once needed you will start needing what you have instead. Let them. But do not let them change your name. My name is Julia Barrett. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I am the daughter of a man who trusted me with more than a fortune. He trusted me with a family line. And I won't let that line be rewritten by people who only learned to spell love when money was involved. The room was silent. Then one woman clapped. Then 20. And just like that I realized. I wasn't alone. The story isn't over. Probably never will be. Family isn't a book with a neat final chapter. It's a thread, frayed, tangled, sometimes knotted, but still running through your hands if you're brave enough to hold it. I still don't speak to Harry and Mary often, but I send Alexa postcards. Every month. No questions asked. No replies required. Just a message. Like this one. Dear Alexa, the world will tell you who to be. Don't listen too closely. Just listen to your heart. And maybe once in a while. Your grandmother too. 17 years had passed. And yet when I heard the knock at the door that morning, I knew exactly who it was. I'd aged. Slower than some, faster than others. My joints told stories my mouth had stopped repeating. My hair had grayed and the garden had gotten wilder. But one thing remained unchanged. I never forgot the sound of Alexa's knock. Even after all those years. I opened the door slowly, not out of caution but reverence. And there she was. No longer a child with braids and a popcorn bag. A woman. Bright eyes. Confident posture. A leather satchel on one shoulder and in her hand. The journal. My journal. The one I started writing after she whispered to me as a little girl. Grandma, tonight my parents are going to take your money. She held it like something sacred. And it was. Hi, Grandma, she said softly. Hi, baby. Tears welled instantly, but I didn't let them fall yet. I stepped aside and she walked in. For a moment I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because none felt big enough for this moment. We sat in the sunroom, her on the old wicker bench, me in Charles's chair. She held the journal in her lap like it had weight. Not just physical. Emotional. Historical. I've read it 3 times, she said finally, her voice steady. Every word. I nodded. I hoped you would. When the time was right. I think I always knew there was more going on. But when you left, no one told me anything. I thought I had done something wrong. That broke me. I reached across and took her hand. You did the bravest thing anyone ever did for me. You told me the truth. Even when you didn't understand why it mattered so much. Her chin trembled. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. You came, I said. That's what matters. We talked for hours. He told me about college. About how she almost didn't apply to the STEM program I funded, but then found my name on the foundation plaque and realized. I think I always wanted to follow you, she said. And I always knew you'd outgrow the map I gave you, I smiled. She laughed then. The same sound from years ago, only fuller. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a stack of folded letters. My postcards. I saved every single one. I didn't know whether to cry or just breathe her in. I read them when I missed you, she said. Even the ones where you just talked about the weather or your garden. It reminded me that someone out there was still rooting for me. I placed a hand on my chest. So I wanted to say. Eventually she asked. Do you hate them? I didn't flinch. I'd prepared for this. I let go of hate a long time ago. It's too heavy to carry into old age. She nodded, but I saw the conflict in her eyes. Mom never talks about it. Dad either. But I know they know. They do, I said. And that silence. It's their choice. Not yours. She stared down at her hands. I'm graduating next spring. I already have 2 job offers. One from a tech company and one from a nonprofit that builds systems for rural hospitals. My heart swelled. What do you want to do? I want to build what helps people. Like you did. Later, as the sun began to dip, she stood by the door, journal tucked beneath her arm. I want you to know something, she said. You already came. You already read it. What else could I ask for? She looked me in the eye. I know what they tried to do. I've pieced it all together. And I want you to know, I'm not them. I'll never be them. I walked toward her, put both hands on her shoulders. You were never them. You were always mine. He hugged me then. Tight. Like she'd never let go. And I let myself believe that maybe she wouldn't. She left with the setting sun, her car disappearing into a road I once drove in a snowstorm. A road I thought led to betrayal. But now it led to redemption. That night I sat at my desk and opened a fresh journal. I wrote one final letter. Dear Alexa, if you're reading this, I want you to remember. The legacy I leave behind is not just in money or trusts or even the foundation. It's in the courage it took to say no when the world expected yes. It's in every letter I wrote hoping you'd one day understand. It's in the woman you've become. Strong. Honest. Whole. You are the reason I never gave up. Love always. Grandma. The journal rests beside the old one now. Just in case she ever needs it. But something tells me she won't. She's not the girl who whispered warnings anymore. She's the woman who'll never need to.